Welcome back to Torn Apart. Today we're doing something weird, something a bit suspicious. I finally watched Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and I was sitting there being like, I feel like we have to look back at the DCEU and try to figure out which movie actually worked. Mostly because this is a universe that has been defined by different extended cuts, ultimate cuts, Snyder cuts, director's cuts, and we never seem to actually find the perfect way of showing these movies. And I'm sitting here being like, now we finally have the time to look back on them and judge them so we can move forward and actually learn something from all of the weirdest journeys that we've been in.
Say it. Say it. Say it. I am Aquaman.
No! God, please, no! No!
I'm gonna be starting by the very top tier, so the movies that I actually enjoyed, that I consider as masterpieces, and we're slowly gonna descend into hell, into the most forgettable movies, into the most flawed movies, into also movies that had quite a lot of potential, but at the end of the day, they were so incredibly flawed from a screenwriting perspective, or even from the special effects, that at the end of the day, I just couldn't give them a good rating.
Here comes a choo-choo train!
And they're almost unwatchable at times because of their length. Let's be honest, most of the DCU movies are incredibly long and I'm not really sure they're that rewatchable, or at least as rewatchable as the MCU movies. But let's jump straight into my movies. I'm gonna try to say at least one positive thing about all of them. This is gonna be a bit of a different video, mostly because it's gonna be almost like a visual essay at times, just because by looking back at all my reviews of these films, I had a lot of really nitpicky and specific things to say, almost for every single movie within the DCU.
No. Wait.
And of course, when I talk about the DCU, I'm not talking about spin-off things like Joker is not gonna be part of it, of course, but Peacemaker is gonna be part of it, since it is 100% part of the DCU, because it is starring characters that we've seen before in the movie, for example, Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad. I'm sorry, I almost got it wrong.
Oh boy, I usually only get this excited when they say the title of a movie in the movie.
So that's it, huh? We're the patsies. We're some kind of Suicide Squad.
He said it!
And I feel like it's almost fair to start with James Gunn's movie The Suicide Squad, which for me is without a doubt one of the best movies in the DCU. I'm pretty sure it's also one of the least successful ones at the box office. This has to do with a lot of things. First of all, the title, just the fact that they changed just a particle at the beginning, and people were supposed to know that it's supposed to be like a reboot slash sequel at the same time, but it's supposed to be good, not like its predecessor. So marketing wise, it was a bit of a mess. Of course, it goes without saying that it's really beautifully shot, it's also incredibly well scored, and it's also well paced. And I feel like The Suicide Squad is exactly the kind of fun and gore nonsense that I experienced while reading the comics, which is something that I didn't really feel at all with all of the other DCU movies. A lot of the action sequences reach that incredible highs of kind of like Kill Bill when it comes to like the definition of lyrical depths. And also we have Starro, who is without a doubt one of the most interesting kaiju level monsters that I've seen in a really long time. But I think this movie really worked for me, mostly because if you take literally any of this movie apart and give it to another director, it really wouldn't work.
You see who that is? Huh? It's your mom!
There is a lot of camp, there is a lot of gore, kind of like Slither if you've seen James Gunn's first few movies, but mostly a lot of love for all of these losers. Even the ones whose lifespan doesn't last longer than 5 minutes. I promised you to say at least one positive thing about each movie, right? But I also want to say at least one negative thing, and of course this movie is also not perfect. I give it the perfect score mostly because it's incredibly fun and enjoyable, but it's not perfect for two specific reasons. reasons. First of all, because I feel like even though it's incredibly funny, there are a lot of gags that completely stop the action and they kind of end up feeling more like standalone marketing materials, as in like clips that you watch on YouTube, rather than essential parts of the plot. For example, the Milton bit is quite effective, but it could have incredibly easily cut out, just because it stops the action, it stops the plot over and over again. And also I kind of hate the trope of mature, very masculine men having a hard time caring for younger people, unless they look exactly like the children. I mean, it's so fucking condescending when you think about it, as if the scope of human empathy just stops at, you don't remind me of my daughter, so you can die. I don't care. The next movie is gonna be Birds of Prey, and I don't remember the other part of the title. I'm pretty sure that's also why this movie didn't work as much as the other ones. Bad marketing, also a lot of sexism, but it's incredibly fun. But it's a movie that it's kind of like trying to do too many things at the same time. It's supposed to be a Harley Quinn movie, but it ends up being almost another Suicide Squad movie with just new characters, new exposition, new things that you have to introduce. And the problem with the DCEU is mostly that every single movie is trying to introduce so many new things that we kind of forget to develop them fully. And as I said before, it ends up being superficial. It still got almost a perfect score for me, mostly because incredible performances, incredible score, incredible action sequences as well. And I also really love how they completely reinvented the character of Harley Quinn in this movie, especially if you look at what she was like in the original Suicide Squad movie. This is kind of a feminist take on it, and I really like it. One thing that I also really loved about this movie is that it really stars a version of Gotham City that is so much more, well, comic booky. It almost reminds me of the Batman animated series or even Batman Forever at times, and it's such a breath of fresh air. And honestly, I don't remember having so much guilt-free fun in front of a comic book movie since probably Thor Ragnarok. So you should probably go back and watch it because it has so many really good things about it.
You know, psychologically speaking, vengeance rarely brings the catharsis we hope for. Yeah. Are we ready?
If you compare this, for example, to the Harley Quinn animated show that is on HBO Max right now, I've seen only a couple of episodes of it, but the Harley Quinn movie is way better, mostly because it just refuses to talk about the Joker. It goes into uncharted lands and it kind of like makes the Harley Quinn character her own outside of the people who surround her. And it's something that I really loved, mostly because I feel Harley Quinn has always been kind of like a crazy character that doesn't really have that much of a backstory unless you're related to the Joker, of course. The next movie on my list is gonna be Aquaman, which was incredibly fun and I watched it at the cinema. Of course, it's far from being perfect and it's a very silly movie, and James Wan really had a good time directing this movie. You can really tell. As soon as this movie goes into the land, basically, and it doesn't stay underwater, it completely bores me. And this is true with most superhero movies just in general. I'm kind of bored of being on Earth, places that we can go to as tourists that we've seen on our TV screen. Even if you look at spy movies or Fast and Furious movies at the end of the day. I like when my DC movies go into complete uncharted universes, new worlds, new underwater worlds. And I feel like this is the only thing that we can nitpick when it comes to this film. Of course, it's really silly. Of course, Amber Heard is not 100% good in it. But at the end of the day, I can't really blame her because there are not that many good romantic couplings and flirtations within the DC universe at all. So the standard is completely low when it comes to that aspect of the plot. It's just matching that. It's not surpassing it. It's not going lower than that. My next movie is gonna be the one right behind me. It's gonna be Man of Steel.
They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.
Man of Steel is a movie that I absolutely adored when it came out. Beautiful cinematography. It also adapted Superman in a completely different way. I grew up with Smallville Superman, so a very different version of Superman. And it was a Superman that really took his time to become Superman, to tease the official suit, to have specific powers. It took him seasons and seasons and seasons and so many different episodes. And this is a movie that really has a lot of balls for snapping Zod's neck, for example, which is something that still today I remember. Beautiful score as well. I think it's Hans Zimmer, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like Henry Cavill is one of the most perfect castings for Superman as well. And for me, it's one of the most egregious things ever. Just the idea that we never got a Man of Steel 2. We immediately went into incredibly weird things like Batman v Superman and the Justice League. For me, this will make no sense. Like in 20 years, when people will be studying like the superhero genre, they will still be talking about the DCEU as the least comprehensive universe in history, even from a budgetary perspective, even as an investment. I think one of the main problems that I have with this movie, though, it has to do with the script, it has to do with the pacing, and once again, unfortunately, it has to do with the kind of exposition that we need to have to establish the Superman lore. And I also think that they couldn't make Superman / Clark relatable. The dichotomy between the two just doesn't work. It almost doesn't exist. Clark Kent does not exist in this movie, and I can actually argue that he does not exist within the DCU overall. And I feel one of my main problems with this film is also the fact that Superman doesn't really choose to do anything when you really think about it. He's really kind of like activated by the finding of the ship and Zod's arrival. He has no agency, and that's why we can't really relate to him and his choices. And also the entire idea that immediately as soon as after he becomes Superman and learns of his destiny, he has to fight all of these sociopathic overpowered aliens. And I need to remind you that within the movie itself, we're never shown that he's acted as Superman for Earth. So technically he has never been in a fight, like ever. He kind of like wants to give us a first version of Superman, but it wants to skip all of the boring part, like the training montages, like Clark Kent having to adapt to a work environment at the Daily Planet, for example. It just skips completely that part and it goes into God mode immediately. It kind of feels like if in a video game you were starting at the very beginning where the movie tells you everything you need to know, and immediately it jumps to the boss fight.
What are you guys? You guys must actually be Oh God!
There is nothing in between. There is no learning curve for Superman, and I feel like it really sucks for that reason. Next on my list is gonna be Wonder Woman, and I feel like here we're starting to get into that category of projects which are good, but they're starting to be quite flawed to the point that I'm not really sure that I would rewatch them. I'd still enjoy them, of course, but they're far from being perfect. And I will admit that I underestimated Gal Gadot at the beginning. I feel like she's a really good Wonder Woman, without a doubt. And I feel also that Patty Jenkins really crafted something really special with this movie. It's a film that follows a very coherent vision, a film that has a character that grows emotionally and physically, but most importantly, a film that never condescends. As Wonder Woman learns about mankind and as she speaks about hope, innocent deaths, and love, I didn't eye roll a single time. And I mean, let me contextualize this for you for a single second, because I'm not a big fan of war films, especially because they force you to swallow so much of the same vague concepts. And every single time that she fought against even the tiniest injustice, I was 100% in. Why? Because it perfectly suits her character. This is kind of what Captain America: The First Avenger should have been, and I feel like they went almost too hard on the training montages and the exposition and didn't focus hard enough in the hope and the good that Captain America actually were a symbol of. Wonder Woman inspires the people around her to be better and stronger, which is something you can say about any of the other DCU superheroes. And at the end of the day, the thing that I really hated about this movie is its third act, which turns into yet another CGI fight and mess as well. I feel like there was a much better version of making this third act. Maybe if she inspired other soldiers to fight alongside her. I don't know, there is something missing about the third act that almost completely tanked the movie for me, and it kind of ruined the experience at the end of the day. And this is when you can really tell that Warner Brothers, even when it chooses really strong directors with a strong voice, they still feel the need to give us that weird CGI fight at the end as if it was something that we needed. If you go back to the MCU, for example, one of my favorite third acts ever, it's the one from Doctor Strange. There is almost no fighting involved, it's just Doctor Strange outsmarting the villain over and over again. It's funny, it's emotionally resonant, there is a lot of CGI involved at the end of the day, but it's clever and it works in the favor of the character development that was established with Doctor Strange. The next on my list is gonna be Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's a really long movie. And I think this is one of those movies that will go down in history as one of the weirdest cinematic experiences ever. Mostly because the marketing around it was weird. The peer pressure on Zack Snyder to actually turn this around was incredibly weird, especially because I think he was dealing with the loss of his daughter. And that's basically what disrupted the production of that movie. But at the end of the day, Justice League, the original movie, was so incredibly bad that this version here, without a doubt, makes it better almost automatically. Probably one of the smoothest 5-hour film that I've seen in my entire life. But I think at the end of the day, even though this is a movie that is incredibly beautiful, that is incredibly epic, that kind of represents everything that we love about DC Comics and these god level heroes, this is kind of like the end of the DCU as we know it, just because it's so incredibly rushed. It's simply humanly impossible to care about all of this when I think about it. It would be like pushing together 3 Avengers films without having almost any of the standalone films to make us care about these characters and the villains and the stakes of this world. At the same time, I really appreciate the attempt and the effort and the hard work that went into this film. I mean, for example, the villain is less cartoonish. Cyborg is actually an interesting character this time around, and the style of this entire film just screams Zack Snyder, and it's honestly really cool. I'm really happy for him. But the humor completely falls flat. It really doesn't work. This film should be completely humorless in my opinion. Now, at the end of the day, will I really rewatch it or recommend it to anyone who is not involved in the superhero films or the DC heroes? No, I don't think so. And for me, that's one of my most important criteria when it comes to what makes a movie good. Because I feel like at the end of the day, even though this movie is so incredibly long, it has so much going on, it doesn't really have anything to say thematically, and it just works as a concept and as a victory for the fans, as a victory for the directors, and a kind of like as a battle for artistic freedom versus the big evil conglomerates of Hollywood. And at the end of the day, even though I like this movie, I can't love it. And that's why it has to be so low within my list as well. The thing that comes right after is not actually a movie, but it's a series, and it's called The Peacemaker. I really enjoyed this, even though I'm pretty sure this is one of those series that was worth doing the binge model for. Waiting for a new episode on a week-to-week basis, it just didn't work. They didn't really have that much budget going on, you can really see it. But The Peacemaker is where you get a glimpse of James Gunn's vision for the DC universe. And that's why it's so high as well in comparison to other incredibly high-budget movies that you probably know, things like Shazam, for example. Mostly because it's well acted, it's well written, it's coherent. And that's something that I really need from my movies, not even from my superhero movies, just from my movies in general. And it needs to be more than just exposition dump, more than just winks to a possible future that might never happen. And I also really love the gore in Peacemaker. I love the tone, I love the comedy in it. It's almost flawless, and it's this low just because it doesn't really represent the DCU as much as the previous movies that I talked about before, and because it really needed more budget to actually shine. Also, nobody watched it. And do we need to remind ourselves of that beautiful theme song and intro? That thing really changed my life, and I'm not even kidding. Once the magic starts, do we really wanna taste it? The next movie is gonna be Shazam. Shazam was incredibly fun. It's directed by David F. Sandberg, and you could really tell that there is an interesting vision behind this movie. It's more scary, and I also love the fact that we have children involved, and the children and the teenagers are actually the superheroes of this movie. Everything goes together quite well. I actually think that it should have been way darker than it is, and Zachary Levi is just a delight every single time that he's on screen, and same thing goes with Jack Dylan Grazer, who completely steals the show to the point that you'll be wondering why he's not the one screaming Shazam. I mean, this is something I still have today. The main character playing the kid in the Shazam movies, he's so incredibly bland. He has a tragic backstory about his mom leaving him basically, and that's it. He doesn't really have that much of a personality, and it really pisses me off a little bit, and it gets even more obvious in the sequel. But one thing that I loved about this movie is that it really makes you swallow all the DCU references and winks much better, just because the scene through the lenses and the eyes of children slash teenagers, so it makes them just better. It gives them a little bit of a charm that was completely absent before, where the references and the lore were just things that you were supposed to take completely seriously. They add world-shattering consequences, Aquaman being the only exception basically, where you could see lore that was there just to be fun. And I feel like Shazam really brings us that as well. There is not that much fun going on in the DCU, and this is a movie that is just so much fun. And I feel like we can sit here and be like, is Shazam objectively better than the movies that I talked about before, than Wonder Woman for example? But I feel like with this list I was trying to do something a bit different. I was trying to kind of rank the movies depending on what they were trying to achieve, and also the importance that they have within the DCU universe as well. The next movie in the list, I feel like we're going into really bad territory. There is almost no fun after the movie I'm gonna be talking about right now, which is Aquaman the Lost Kingdom. I have a lot to say when it comes to this film. A lot of people thought that this movie was not gonna come out just because we didn't really have a trailer. They reused some shots from the previous movie in the first trailer as well. So people actually wondered if this movie existed, if this was not just a weird hallucination that we were all going through.
Got any more krill-brained ideas?
It really sucks because I feel like James Wan has really crafted an underwater universe that is more beautiful and fun than the one that James Cameron created with Avatar. But the film never lingers for enough time for us to actually appreciate any of it. I mean, I feel like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is kind of like the ultimate special effects crew nightmare, where you probably spent years working on a 3-second shot and no one will ever appreciate it because of a phony script and really weird pacing issues. Also, let's not even address the fact that they gave Aquaman a toddler in his second movie ever. You know what kills a superhero? A fucking toddler. Of course he exits the pictures pretty soon and he comes back only by the very final act. Same goes with his wife really. Why is he still living with his father? Is it just because it makes for faster scenes? Because since he doesn't have to move from his couch to talk to him, it's so much easier. Also, why is Randall Park in this movie? And to be honest, why is Black Manta in this movie as well? He's such a perfect one-note villain for just one movie. Also, why has Black Manta not just killed Aquaman and his family after having gotten the weapon? It is clearly shown that he can hurt them pretty badly, so what is the need of going through the whole plot really? Also, why has Oren been turned into a comic relief buddy cop character? Also, why spend so much time teasing the return of this weird video game Sauron only for Aquaman to dispose of him in literally 5 seconds? Also, why do they decide to create a link with the people of the land at the end? It's literally not what this movie was about. Wow, this movie was so incredibly stupid. It's just created so many questions in my head, and you could really tell that the screenwriters had to probably analyze themselves after seeing what they did with their script and how they decided to greenlit a movie like this. It just makes no sense to me.
I have sonar.
Yeah, for talking to fish.
I have super hearing.
So you can listen to fish?
I can breathe underwater.
Because that's where the fish you talk to are?
Night vision.
So you can find the fish.
I feel like this video is never going to end, but let's talk about Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, and not the edition that came out basically in the cinemas. It's not like it changes anything, it just makes it a little bit longer, and it kind of like contextualizes a couple of things when it comes to Superman and a couple of things when it comes to Batman's motivation. It's still a mess of a movie that shouldn't exist. Honestly, I always wanted to make a video about Batman v Superman, kind of like completely nitpicking and destroying it. Of course, the easy way out is to talk about the Martha problem, which is the most boring, stupid things that I've ever seen, not even in comic book history, in just filmmaking history, without a doubt. But at the end of the day, the Ultimate Edition still works a lot better than the cinema version, mostly because the cinema version literally did not make any sense. The Ultimate version, for example, makes it really clear that Luthor knew everything from the start and he was playing evil puppeteer. Also, Lois Lane technically is doing some actual reporting and she's really good at it. Superman is not really improved by this version, but at least now the film makes a little bit more sense. But most of it is still so incredibly stupid. Lex creating Doomsday makes no sense at all. And actually, if you wanted the film to have a good third act, Batman and Superman should have fought and then should have teamed up against Luthor, maybe just fighting a couple of goons at LexCorp, trying not to kill anyone, and him making a final speech. I feel like that would have been a much better ending instead of like going straight towards Doomsday and also introducing Wonder Woman. Weirdest choice ever. I also kind of believe that Zack Snyder doesn't really understand Superman. I mean, he has zero character development in this film and he has so much material to work with, having killed so many people in the first movie, and he should be begging everyone to forgive him, but no, instead he just flies around being sad and not understanding why everyone is so mean to him. I've seen this movie like 3 times, and honestly, after having seen MCU films like Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War and Endgame, big budget movies with incredibly well coordinated CGI fights, I will have to admit that the fight fucking sucks in this movie. It really feels like 2 pieces of CGI rubber kind of like punching each other. So I can really see a universe where the script of this movie had some kind of potential, but it also has so many incredible flaws, so many new characters being introduced and immediately turned into Machiavellic villains who know the identity of everyone within the DCEU without any kind of background at the end of the day. I feel like Lex Luthor was not even supposed to be introduced in this movie. Maybe it was supposed to be introduced in Man of Steel. It would have been way more interesting that way. There are so many logical gaps in this movie and it honestly pisses me off. I've seen this movie so many times and it keeps pissing me off every single time that I watch it. The next movie in the list is actually something that I enjoyed the first time that I watched it, and then I kind of realized that it's very mediocre.
Now what you're gonna see here is why the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Once again, it's another attempt, like Suicide Squad, like Birds of Prey, of turning a movie into a team-up movie, even though it's not supposed to be a team-up movie. It's just supposed to be about the main character that you wanted to see. But this is kind of like the weirdest of them all, because the Justice Society of America is the most interesting part of the Black Adam movie, and the conflict in between Black Adam and the Justice Society is also interesting. The idea of the Justice Society basically not intervening for certain things and kind of being run by the government. It's kind of like what will come after Captain America Civil War, meaning that the government would be in control of where it would send certain superheroes, and then you would have certain things happening around the world, like terrorist attacks, political coups, and just bad people being in charge of, for example, of Middle Eastern countries. And of course the American government not sending superheroes to stop that, because that would create too many problems from a foreign policy point of view. That part is interesting. Everything else around the film is so incredibly weird. The weird Satan God of War creature at the end is really cool, but it makes no sense. Let's admit it, makes no sense. Also, I feel like there should have been way more fighting in the third act, but not necessarily against Satan himself, more against goons just in general, hell creatures. The next movie is another example of excellent mediocrity. I'm of course talking about Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods.
I'm over 6,000 years old.
You look great.
I think I actually have a review for this movie, so I will not spend that much time on it. This doesn't work at all from any perspective. I can't think of a single positive thing about this movie. I mean, there's a literal ad in this movie. Zachary Levi has become annoying. There is almost no connection at all in between the teenagers and their adult versions. And once again, I can see a better version of this movie somewhere. A better version of this movie where, as a teenager, you want to grow up as fast as possible. So you could have a version of them who basically they want to stay in superhero form all the time just because they hate their bodies, just because they hate the stuff that is going out in school, for example. That idea is really cool, and that's what they should have exploited a little bit more in the second movie, in my opinion. And I feel like there was not enough connection between the actors portraying the children and the actors portraying the adults. They felt very disconnected this time around, and I really didn't feel their personality coming through. Besides for the little girl, of course, but it's incredibly easy. You just have to act like a silly little girl and it will work. The attempts of creating links with the rest of the DCU, honestly ridiculous. This is without a doubt one of the worst films I've ever seen. I still get nightmares of the Jimon Honsu's scene with Wonder Woman. Same thing goes with the final sacrifice by Billy Baxter at the end, only for Wonder Woman to appear and to suddenly like revive him. Is that one of her powers? I didn't even know. It was so incredibly annoying and weird. This movie just doesn't work. One positive thing, I like the dragon. The dragon looks cool, and the idea that its fire breath is based on fear, that's really cool. I love dragons just in general. Well, we really touched the floor right now, and we can only go deeper and deeper into the ground, into the catacombs of sheer mediocrity and badness. The next movie is gonna be Wonder Woman 1984.
Max Lord, you're putting yourself and everyone else in grave danger. I need you to give me the stone. What happened to it?
Uh-oh. Stinky.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room and the fact that she basically forces a guy to have sex with her, to have a relationship with her without his consent, just because he's being possessed by her ex-boyfriend. Just the idea of bringing back Chris Pine is so incredibly stupid. I really don't get it. I feel like big budget movies, they don't really have a sense of the emotional weight of a sacrifice within a movie. Chris Pine's death was motivating for Wonder Woman, and it also gave something to do to his character. It gave him a tragic death, and it made him immediately more interesting. Maybe it's a little bit fucked up, but at the end of the day, I think it's still quite cool from a cinematic perspective, and they completely ruined that. Cheetah is one of the worst villains I've ever seen. Kristen Wiig's performance is so bad, but it's not because of her. It's because this is a really, really weird movie. It's incredibly long as well. Pedro Pascal is the only reason why this movie is interesting. That is gonna be my thing that I liked about this movie. Pedro Pascal is going 100% in it. He's being weird, playing Maxwell Lord. I could sit here and nitpick so many things about this movie, but I don't want to, because it is generally agreed that this is a really, really bad movie. And at the end of the day, it's kind of funny how Zack Snyder needs more than 2 hours and a half to tell these DC godly cinematic stories because of the amount of world building that he has to deal with. And then you have Patty Jenkins, who is like, here's 2 hours of just walking around the 80s with the dead boyfriend and one cool rock. There you go. This is the movie you've been asking for. Now we're talking about something that we all agree that is incredibly bad. It's the Suicide Squad movie directed by David Ayer. The script doesn't work. The characters are clearly taken out of a video game, without a doubt, because they don't really have that much going on. We have the most disgusting dialogues I've ever seen on screen.
This is Katana. She's got my katana. She can cut all you in half with one katana. Just like Mon the katana. I would advise not getting killed by katana. Her katana traps the souls of its...
We have no cohesion when it comes to the directorial style. This is a movie that looked really good in trailer form, and that is basically it. It gives us a version of the Joker that is disturbing, not in a good way. There are two good things about this movie. One is not really related to it at all. The marketing campaign for Suicide Squad was really, really, really good, and I think that's probably why it made quite a lot of money, mostly because of that. Harley Quinn, without a doubt, is the only thing that makes this watchable or interesting. Margot Robbie is a really, really good Harley Quinn. Performance is just a standout. Cara Delevingne is disgusting as the villain. I love Cara Delevingne, but I don't think that she's a good actress. I'm sorry.
That's it? What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
Oh, that's why they call it that.
Now we finally hit the bottom. We can talk about two of the worst movies in DCU. First of all, we can talk about Joss Whedon's Justice League and the fact that it kind of looks like a video game, and it is a video game without a doubt. It's rushing through so many different plot lines at the same time. It honestly doesn't make that much sense. The humor doesn't have its place in it. And the worst part about it is that I went in with my lowest expectations ever and actually saw this at the cinema. I was expecting something even worse than Batman v Superman, because Steppenwolf is the most 2005 video game looking villain ever. He comes in with a classic and then he uses his space mosquitoes to steal a couple of boxes, and when put together, blah 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 blah, you can imagine the rest. It's incredibly boring, it's incredibly tedious. And I feel like at the end of the day, what hurts this version of Justice League the most? Automatic inconsistencies, because Zack Snyder has been building a universe where people are scared of superpowered beings, and this film completely turns it upside down. Another thing that this film is really missing, it's a point of reference. A point of reference will always be the humans, or any personality trait that we see as human. But in this film, they're just not present. Where Batman v Superman tried at least to be politically sensitive, Justice League asks us to swallow an hour 30 of world destruction where no one gets hurt, and it's almost like they took all the critiques of Man of Steel and BVS, put them together without thinking, and built the most straightforward superhero film ever, and honestly I'm not here for it at all. This movie deserves to be deleted from history. I hope that people will forget about it and watch Zack Snyder's version instead, because honestly there is nothing worth saving from it. Maybe one joke that the Flash says is funny. There, I said something that I liked about this movie. Talking about the Flash, that's the bottom tier. I gave it a 0 score out of 5 on my DCU ranking thing. Mostly because this is everything that we hate about DCU. This is everything we hate about blockbuster Hollywood big budget filmmaking right now. It's the references, it's all the different cameos, it's the rushed CGI, it's the rushed script, it's the bad performances, it's the bad marketing campaign. It's all of those things put together. This film is actually insulting. Like, it has people in it that didn't really ask to be in it. Christopher Reeve, for example, he's dead. He didn't ask to be in it, and apparently, allegedly, his family was not consulted that he would be in it at all. Nicolas Cage as well seemed very confused to be in one of the cameos from this movie. Keaton doesn't work at all. A lot of people say that he's the best part of this movie, but that's just because he's surrounded by a lot of garbage. The fact of bringing back Zod, reintroducing a new Supergirl that we've never seen, trying to create the Flashpoint thing out of nowhere where we barely know the Flash as a character. Most people know the Flash just because of the TV show. If it wasn't for the TV show, no one would give a shit about the Flash. But for the people who didn't watch the TV show, the Flash is just a person who runs fast. Once again, a movie that is doomed by exposition, world building, lore, but most of it a really bad script and a really bad direction. There is nothing that works in this film. There is nothing that I like. I don't even like the posters. There is nothing, absolutely nothing. But I think we finally did it. We finally talked about all the DCU movies and deconstructed them. This is probably gonna be a really long video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what your ranking is. Let me know what you thought of this phase of the universe as well, if you're looking forward to what's coming next, or if you don't care at all. Let me know. If you like this video, as usual, I'm gonna put down here all of the other videos that are going around the same topic, so it's gonna be superhero stuff, of course, so you can watch them and keep the algorithm happy so that it makes me happy as well, because I'm such a small channel. Here at the top, I'm gonna be putting the topic of the video that is coming out in the next 2 weeks, even though things change quite often, so don't be angry at me if I decide to focus on something different. Don't forget to smash that like button, because every single time that you do that, you make sure that Justice League, the Joss Whedon edition, is not seen by any other human being on Earth.
Can I count on you?
No one deserves to see that. That movie does not exist. I want someone to create the Men in Black technology just to delete that movie from existence. I'm almost 100% sure it will make Zack Snyder's version even better than it is. But anyways, I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Scaled dick. dick.
Everybody knew that.